Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Surah Al-Maa'idah, ayah number 92. قال الله تعالى: وأطيعوا الله وأطيعوا الرسول واحذروا فإن توليتم فاعلموا أنما على رسولنا البلاغ المبين. The words in this ayah are nothing particularly new. وأطيعوا from Ata'a yuti'u ida'atan, to obey. He says obey Allah and obey the messenger. That refers to the last messenger, the last prophet to whom the Quran was revealed, Muhammad ibn Abdullah ibn Abdul Muttalib ibn Hashim ibn Abdi Manaf ibn Qusay alayhi salatu wassalam. And he says wahdharu from hadira yahdharu hadran, to be aware or to take care or to be wary about some sort of danger. That is to say, be aware of falling into sin and transgressing the limits of Allah Jalla wa Ala. He says, فَإِن تَوَلَّيْتُمْ, if you turn away, then you should know that the only duty on our messenger is al-balagh, which means conveyance, al-mubin, that which is clear and makes clear. So just a clear conveyance is the only duty on our messenger. Notice he says our messenger. Allah links the messenger to himself as a way of honoring, as Allah is the most honored, and anything that is linked to him also takes a share of that honor. Let us reflect on ayah number 92. We take the most important lesson that Allah is to be obeyed, and this would obviously be from the Quran, and that the messenger is to be obeyed, and this would be from his narrations and his verbal orders, which are not part of the Quran. Now those who would reject the ahadith would say that the Quran is enough for us. They would say that Allah says, وَنَزَّلْنَا عَلَيْكَ الْكِتَابَ تِبْيَانًا لِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ. We send down to you the book, making plain everything. So if that's the case, then the Quran makes plain everything, and therefore it is sufficient for us. We have no need for the ahadith. And the answer to this specious argument is that the Quran makes plain everything. That is true, and from everything is that it orders us to follow the Prophet. In other words, his instructions outside the Quran or external to the Quran. For example, the Prophet has told us that eating the meat of the donkey is haram, as it is najis. We do not find this particular ruling in the Quran. So when in the Quran we read ayat like these, obey Allah and obey the messenger, and also we read مَن يُطِعِ الرَّسُولَ فَقَدْ أَطَاعَ اللَّهَ, whoever obeys the messenger, then he has obeyed Allah. Then it teaches us that we are to follow the instructions of the Prophet, even if they are external to the Quran. So that's from the text standpoint of view. As for the rational standpoint of view, if we say that the ahadith are not to be followed, as we do not need them, then that is exactly like saying that the Prophet has no authority in the deen. The Prophet is basically like a tape recorder reciting the Quran, and we take the Quran from this tape recorder. The tape recorder itself has no authority in the deen. Now, thinking this way of any Prophet is unbefitting, to say the least. And what is funny is that you would find people going to their shuyukh, their scholars, for a fatwa. So clearly they are taking their scholars as an authority in the deen. And so how can you not take the Prophet as an authority in the deen? It simply makes no sense. We also take the obligation of being aware and being on guard against committing sin. And this can only be the case if committing sin was a punishable act. Because if it was not punishable and there were no consequences, then you would not need to be aware and be on guard. Also, we find that the Prophet is not obligated to convert people. He is only obligated to convey the message clearly. And that this is also an obligation upon us as well, wherever we can do that. With the kuffar is to convey clearly the message. We are not obligated to convert anyone to al-Islam. We also take that this Sharia is mubin. It is not only clear, but it makes clear. It takes you out of confusion and into clarity. Ayah number 93. لَيْسَ عَلَى الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات جناح فيما طعموا إذا ما اتقوا وآمنوا وعملوا الصالحات ثم اتقوا وآمنوا ثم اتقوا وأحسنوا والله يحب المحسنين. Now this ayah is linked to ayat number 90 and 91, talking about the prohibition of khamr and maisir al-ansab and azlam. This ayah says there is no junah, there is no sin on those people who believed, they had iman, for what they ate or what they consumed. So these believers, they consumed khamr before it was made haram. So before it was made haram, this ayah is telling us there is no sin upon them if they drank khamr, or even if they earned money through maisir, through gambling. So as for those Muslims who drank alcohol and gambled and then they repented, that is okay. But what about those Muslims who drank the alcohol and they earned their money through gambling and died before the prohibition was revealed? What about them? This ayah is telling us that there is no sin upon them, as long as they had taqwa of Allah Jalla wa Ala. And this is similar to when the Qibla was changed from Baytul Maqdis to the Kaaba. The Prophet was asked, what about those Muslims who prayed towards the Baytul Maqdis and they died before having the chance to pray towards the Kaaba? And in Surah Al-Baqarah, ayah 143, Allah Jalla wa Ala tells them, وَمَا كَانَ اللَّهُ لِيُضِيعَ إِيمَانَكُمْ. Allah was never going to waste your iman, meaning your salah. A couple of linguistic points here. Notice it says ta'imu, which normally means to eat, but here it's referring to drinking khamr. You do not eat khamr. The answer is that ta'ima can refer to drinking as well. You remember in Surah Al-Baqarah, Talut telling his people, talking about a river which they will be tested by, he says, فَمَنْ شَرِبَ مِنْهُ فَلَيْسَ مِنِّي. Whoever drinks from it, then he is not from me, meaning not from my true followers. So the word shariba refers to drinking. Then he says, وَمَنْ لَمْ يَطْعَمْهُ فَإِنَّهُ مِنِّي إِلَّا مَنِ اغْتَرَفَ غُرْفَةً بِيَدِهِ. And whoever does not drink it, then he is from me, except the one who scoops a handful. So you see that shariba and ta'ima, they're used interchangeably. So ta'ima can be used to refer to drinking. The second linguistic point is that why does this ayah repeat taqwa? It mentions it 3 times. And the answer is madi, hadir wa mustaqbil. Madi means past. So the first time when he says إِذَا مَتَّقَوْا وَآمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ, this is what happened in the past, before the prohibition. There is no sin upon such people as long as they had taqwa, they avoided all the other muharramat which they knew of, and they believed and they worked righteousness. So that is the past tense. Then he says ثُمَّ اتَّقَوْا وَآمَنُوا, and then they have taqwa, meaning avoid the haram actions, and they believe, have iman. This is talking about the present tense, now that the prohibition of khamr has been revealed fully. And then he says ثُمَّ اتَّقَوْا وَأَحْسَنُوا, and then they have taqwa and do good. This is talking about the future. So in the future you avoid the alcohol and other intoxicants and haram actions. وَأَحْسَنُوا, and you do righteous works. And he ends by saying that Allah loves the muhsinin, those who do good. Also, he uses the letter ma when he says إِذَا مَتَّقَوْا. He could have just said إِذَا اتَّقَوْا, and the meaning would not change. But this letter ma, they call it harfu sila, and it only adds emphasis to the meaning. So saying إِذَا اتَّقَوْا, if they have taqwa, and you could say إِذَا مَتَّقَوْا, if they have taqwa, but the ma just adds a little extra punch to the meaning. So reflecting on ayah number 93, we learn that sin is only applicable to you if you know what the ruling is. So if you drink alcohol and you do not know of its ruling because the message has not reached you, then there is no sin upon you. But where you are restricted is that you need to obey that which you have knowledge of. Because Allah Jalla wa Ala says that for such people who drank alcohol when it was halal and they died before the prohibition reached them, that there's no sin upon them as long as they had taqwa and worked righteousness. So, for example, if you have haram earnings and from the haram earnings you purchase halal food, then there is still sin upon you in that, because you did not practice taqwa of Allah Jalla wa Ala. We find in this ayah the importance and fadila of taqwa, iman, righteous actions and ihsan, because Allah Jalla wa Ala mentions them in a positive light. As for ihsan to other people, then it is to show generosity to them, to do a favor to them and to help them out, and so on. As for ihsan to Allah Jalla wa Ala, then it is to worship Allah as if you see Him. And of course, though you do not see Him, but He sees you. So imagine you're worshipping Allah and Allah is right there in front of you, looking at you, and you can see Him looking at you. So of course you're going to make your acts of ibadah the best quality you possibly can. And you're going to make sure that you are on your best behavior possible. Just like if you're driving a car and you are going over the speed limit. Then you see a speed camera sign. What do? Immediately you slow down, because now you know that you're being watched. So when you know that you're being watched, you immediately become self-aware and self-conscious. And this is exactly what you want in your relationship with Allah Jalla wa Ala. You need to be aware of what you are doing and always be mindful of Allah Jalla wa Ala. That is to say, you're conscious of the fact that He is always observing you. We also take the attribute of Allah, love. He loves those who do good. And of course His attribute is befitting to His divine majesty. Ayah number 94. Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu la yabluwannakum Allahu bishay'in min as-saydi tanaluhu aydikum wa rimahukum liya'lama Allahu man yakhafuhu bil ghaybi faman i'tada ba'da dhalika falahu azabun alimun. In this ayah He changes the topic. He calls out to the believers. He says that Allah will surely test you. Bala yablu, to test or to put to trial. Notice the lam and the nun shadda. We have spoken about this before, to emphasize the verb. So He will surely put you to trial. Bishay'in, with something, min, from, sayd, that is the game animals, the animals that you hunt with your spears, or nowadays it could be with a sniper rifle or a shotgun. Tanaluhu aydikum, which your aidi hands will attain, meaning you can physically catch these animals with your hands. Warimahukum, and your spears can catch these animals. They'll be well within reach and easy to hunt. So with your hands you could catch smaller game animals or even eggs of birds which you would normally hunt. That is impermissible in the state of ihram. And with the spears or the lances you would catch the larger and faster game animals such as the zebra and the gazelle and these types. He says so that Allah may know who fears Him in the unseen. That is to say, you cannot see Allah Jalla wa Ala because Allah is from the matters of the unseen, and yet you still fear Him. And He says, whoever i'tada, transgresses the limits, ba'da dhalika, after that, meaning after he has been put to the test by having the game animals in front of him, falahu azabun alim, he will have a painful torment. Now to understand this ayah properly, we need the context. The context is the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, when the Prophet and the companions wanted to perform their Umrah. They were in the state of ihram, and in the state of ihram you're not allowed to hunt game animals. So when they were in the state of ihram, they saw zebras and birds, as in birds which you can hunt, all around them, easy to catch. And this was a test from Allah Jalla wa Ala. Are they going to disobey the order or not? And this is analogous to the people of the Sabbath, where the fish would come out openly in the sea on the Sabbath day, where they were not allowed to fish, and yet they used the trickery to get around the haram. And we found that the companions did not hunt the game animals, they passed the test. So it shows us the great difference between the Banu Israel and the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. Also a linguistic point, Allah Jalla wa Ala says, لِيَعْلَمَ Allah, so that Allah may know who fears Him in the unseen. This knowledge is the subsequent knowledge, as opposed to the antecedent knowledge, which is the knowledge of Allah before an event happens, and the subsequent knowledge is the knowledge of Allah after the event takes place. So the knowledge referred to in this ayah is the ilmun lahiq, the subsequent knowledge. This is the knowledge from which Allah punishes or rewards. So Allah Jalla wa Ala knows that a person is going to commit sin before he commits sin. But Allah Jalla wa Ala with this knowledge cannot punish that person for the sin. He can only punish a person after the sin is committed. That is to say, He can only punish a person on his ilmun lahiq, on his subsequent knowledge, never on his antecedent knowledge. We notice also that He says, بِشَيْءٍ مِّنَ الصَّيْدِ, something of the game animals. It means that the fitna is not an immense fitna that you cannot cope with or find it extremely difficult to cope with. Rather, it is something of a fitna. So any fitna that comes your way is something that you can cope with. It is not something that will overwhelm you. Reflecting on ayah number 94, we find that Allah Jalla wa Ala can make committing sins easy and appealing for many people. This is not because Allah loves that people should commit sin, but rather this is as a test. Because anyone who claims to have Iman is certainly going to go through trials and tests to see if they're truthful or not. And this is just a reality, there is no escaping it, so prepare yourself for many different types of tests. The good news is that any test that does come your way is within your capability to overcome, as Allah does not burden anyone more than they can bear. And though this ayah does not mention it, we know that the Sahaba passed this test and they did not hunt whilst in the state of Ihram, as opposed to the Yahud with their story of the Yawm al-Sabt, which is well known. We find that one of the traits of the believer is that he fears Allah even though he does not see Allah Jalla wa Ala, because He says, مَنْ يَخَافُهُ بِالْغَيْبِ. Ghayb means unseen, because Allah is from the matters of the unseen. It is easy to fear someone or something when you can see it in front of you, like a cobra or any other type of poisonous or dangerous animal. But the true believer fears Allah without having seen Him, and this is a sign of Iman. It is also possible to interpret bil ghayb to mean that he fears Allah Jalla wa Ala when the person or the believer himself is alone and no one can see him. And this is also a trait of the believer. It is easy to be a muttaqi in front of everyone else and be on your best behavior. But when you are alone and you feel more free, then can you have taqwa or not? هذا والله أعلم.